The power went out at 11:14 on a Tuesday, and I know the exact minute because I was standing in my own basement watching a thin line of water creep toward $3,000 of camera equipment. The ice storm had been on the news all week, the kind of forecast people joke about until the trees start snapping outside their windows. I run a small photography business out of my house, mostly weddings and senior portraits, and the basement is where I keep everything. Lights, backdrops, 2 bodies and 4 lenses I am still paying off. When the power died, so did my sump pump, and the water that usually drains out through the floor line started backing up instead. I had a battery lantern, a wet vac with no working outlet, and a landline app on my phone that was somehow the only signal getting through. What I did not have was a generator strong enough to run the pump until the power came back. Mia did. Her father kept one in his garage, a big one he used for tailgates, and one memorable camping trip that ended in a raccoon incident she still brought up whenever she wanted to laugh. Mia lived 15 minutes from her parents, 20 from me. I called her. "Hey," she said, and I could hear a show playing behind her, something with a laugh track. "Everything okay?" "No. Basement's flooding. I need your dad's generator, the one in the garage, and the extension cords hanging next to it. Can you grab it and bring it over?" A pause. Not a short one. "Right now? It's freezing out there." "Mia, my equipment is sitting in 3 inches of water." "Okay, but can't you just put towels down or something?" I looked at the water climbing the leg of my light stand. Towels aren't going to stop a flooded basement. "You're being a little dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm asking for help." She sighed the way she always did when I asked for anything that interrupted her evening. This long, put upon exhale that made me feel like I'd requested a kidney. "Fine. Let me finish this episode and I'll head over. The generator's the priority." "Please don't finish the episode first. I heard you the first time." I sent her my address like she didn't already have it memorized after 2 years, and then I went back to bailing water into a bucket with my bare hands because I didn't trust the water heater not to short something out if I left the breaker on. 40 minutes passed, then an hour. I called twice. Straight to voicemail both times, that flat robotic voice telling me the person I was trying to reach was unavailable. By the time headlights swung into my driveway, I had moved everything I could lift onto the workbench, and I was sitting on the stairs with my hands raw and cold, doing that thing where you're too tired to be angry and too angry to be calm. The car door slammed. Footsteps on the icy walk. Not Mia's careful little steps in her going-out boots. Someone moving fast. Jordan? The basement door swung open and Elena came down the stairs 2 at a time, a generator cart bumping behind her, cheeks red from the cold. Mia's cousin, 26, worked as a vet tech across town, showed up to every family thing with some rescue foster dog trailing behind her that she swore she wasn't going to keep and always kept. "Where's Mia?" I said, before I could stop myself. Elena set the generator down and pushed a strand of dark hair out of her face. "She's at her parents' place. She asked me to bring this. Said you were freaking out over some water damage." I laughed, short and humorless. "Freaking out? Sure. I take it that's not accurate. My whole business is down here." I gestured at the wet floor, the bucket, the equipment case I'd stacked like sandbags. "I called her over an hour ago." Elena's jaw tightened. "She told me 20 minutes ago. That landed harder than it should have." Mia had sat on my emergency for 40 minutes before she even mentioned it to someone who could help, and then framed it like she was doing me a favor by delegating. "I'm sorry," Elena said. I should have just come the second she asked. "You didn't do anything wrong." "No, but I got here late anyway." She was already unwinding the extension cord, checking the generator's fuel gauge without being asked. "Tell me what you need." We got the generator running on the driveway, cord fed through a cracked window, sump pump roaring back to life. Elena held the flashlight app on her phone steady while I repositioned the hose, and when the water finally started receding instead of rising, she let out a breath like she'd been the one worried about the equipment the whole time. "You didn't have to stay for the whole thing," I told her, once the worst of it was over. "You're bailing water in a basement during an ice storm. I'm not leaving you down here alone. I've had worse Tuesdays." Doubtful. Fair. She helped me haul the wet vac up the stairs, and by the time we were done, both of us were soaked to the knees, and it was almost 1 in the morning. There's a diner near my place that never closes, one of those chrome and vinyl spots that smells like burnt coffee and better days. I asked her if she wanted pancakes. She said only if I was buying, since she'd technically rescued my livelihood. I said that felt like extortion. She said it felt like fair market value. We sat in a booth by the window, dripping onto the seats, and she wrapped both hands around a mug like she was trying to steal its warmth through osmosis. You really didn't have to feed me, she said. You drove across town in an ice storm because Mia couldn't be bothered to get off the couch. She looked down at the table. She's my cousin. I don't want to make her look bad. She's doing that herself. Elena didn't argue. She told me about her job instead. How she'd talked a Rottweiler through a thunderstorm phobia that afternoon by sitting on the kennel floor with him for 40 minutes. How her boss thought she was too soft for emergency intake, and she thought her boss had never actually looked an animal in the eye. I told her about the wedding season grind, the parents who wanted every photo retouched into a different bone structure, the fact that I did 50% creative work and 50% explaining invoices to people who thought editing was free. You're funny, she said. Mia never mentions that. I don't perform well under a laugh track. She smiled into her coffee. Then it faded a little. She talks about you like you're a good tenant, reliable, pays on time, doesn't cause problems. I sat with that for a second. Reliable's not the worst thing to be called. It's not a compliment when it's the only thing. I didn't have an answer for that, so I paid the check before she could argue, and we stood by her car afterward, breath fogging in the cold. Thank you, I said, for actually showing up. Anyone would have. No, not anyone would have. She looked at me a second too long, then looked away first, which I would come to learn was very unlike her. Get some sleep, Jordan. You too, Elena. When I got home from the diner, Mia was already asleep. She didn't ask about the basement until the next morning, over coffee she hadn't made for me. Did Elena get the generator to you okay? Eventually. An hour and a half after I called you. I told her right away. You told her 20 minutes before she showed up. You sat on it. Mia's mouth flattened. I was going to go myself, but then I figured she was closer to her parents' place, so it made more sense. You didn't figure that out until after I called you twice and got voicemail. God, Jordan, it's a generator, not a kidney transplant. It's my entire business sitting in floodwater while you finished a television episode. She rolled her eyes, the specific eye roll she saved for whenever I brought up something that inconvenienced her narrative. You're making this into a whole thing. I'm noticing a pattern. There's no pattern. I had a stressful day. I didn't say anything else that morning. I'd learned a while back that arguing with Mia about her own behavior was like trying to nail water to a wall, and I had equipment to dry out. 2 days later, she made me coffee before I left for work, which in Mia's language was practically a Hallmark card. I'm sorry about Tuesday, she said, leaning against the counter with her arms crossed like the apology cost her something physical. Sorry for what part? For not coming right away. Do you know how long I sat down there? I said I was sorry. I heard the words. I didn't hear anything underneath them. Her face sharpened. You're being impossible. I'm being specific. I took the coffee to work because I'm not an idiot, but I didn't mistake it for repair. Elena texted me 2 days after that. Just a photo of the sump pump, captioned, proof it survived the war. I laughed out loud at my kitchen table, alone, at 7 in the morning, which should have told me something. We won, I typed back. Equipment's dry. Business saved. Hero status confirmed. I do accept payment in pancakes, she wrote. Ongoing arrangement, if you're offering. I told myself it was nothing. 2 people who'd been through a minor crisis together, staying in touch, completely normal. Then I found myself replying faster than I needed to, and reading her texts twice before I answered, and that's usually the moment normal stops being an accurate word. Somewhere in between, she asked if I'd help her carry a secondhand bookshelf up 2 flights of stairs, since her upstairs neighbor had bailed on her at the last minute. I told her I was uniquely qualified in the field of other people's furniture emergencies. She said that was a strange specialty to be proud of. We got the thing wedged sideways in the stairwell for a solid 10 minutes, both of us laughing too hard to actually lift it. And by the time we finally forced it through her doorway, we were both out of breath, and she was pressing her forehead against the wood like it had personally wronged her. I'm never buying furniture again, she said. Everything I own from now on stays in its box. Bold strategy. Efficient strategy. She made me water instead of tea that time, since neither of us had the energy for boiling anything. And we sat on her floor with our backs against the new bookshelf because she hadn't bought a couch yet. It should have felt like nothing. It felt like something I was going to think about for days. A week later, she called about a relief valve on her water heater that wouldn't stop hissing, and asked if I knew anything about it. I told her to shut off the intake valve before she scalded herself. She said she'd already tried that, and it hadn't helped. I said I could come look at it, if she wanted, since apparently I owed her a favor bank at this point. Her apartment was small and warm and smelled like something with cinnamon in it. She answered the door in an old college sweatshirt, hair pulled back, looking mortified before I even got inside. Before you judge my plumbing skills, I would never judge your plumbing skills. You absolutely would. Quietly. Professionally. It took me 15 minutes and a wrench to find the actual problem. a worn gasket that needed replacing rather than anything she'd done wrong. When I told her, she groaned and put her face in her hands. I called you over a $5 part. I don't mind. The words came out too fast, too honest, and she went still for a second before she recovered and made tea, because apparently we were the kind of people who defaulted to hot beverages instead of naming things out loud. We stood in her kitchen, mugs between us like a boundary line. "How's it going with Mia?" she asked. "Not great. Because of the generator thing?" That's not the whole reason. That was just the first time I noticed it clearly. Elena wrapped both hands around her mug. She does this thing where she assumes people will stick around no matter what she does. Always has, even as a kid. That sounds like personal experience. It is. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't push, because families keep locked, rooms even at the good holidays. Why are you really here, Jordan? I could have said the wrench, the gasket, the favor bank. I didn't, because I wanted to see you. She looked down at her tea like it had suddenly become very interesting. You can't say things like that. I know. Then don't. I'm trying not to. Try harder. I left 10 minutes later, and I hated myself less for wanting to stay than for what wanting to stay meant about everything I'd been avoiding. Mia noticed the shift before I said anything about it. "You've been distracted?" she said one night, scrolling her phone on the couch without looking up. "I've had a lot going on." "You didn't used to come home looking like you were somewhere else the whole time." I set my keys down. "Maybe you never noticed before because you weren't paying attention." Her eyes cut to me. "Excuse me? I've started paying attention to a lot of things. Is this still about the generator?" "It started there. I apologized for that." "You apologized for the delay?" "You never apologized for the pattern." She stood, came around the couch, put a hand on my arm in a way she hadn't in months. "Baby, come on. I've been stressed. Work's insane right now. Can we not do this?" For 1 second, 2 years of history pulled at me harder than logic did. Then I looked at her hand and thought about Elena holding a flashlight steady in freezing water without being asked twice, and the pull let go. "What does not doing this actually mean, Mia?" She blinked. "It means stop making everything a referendum on our relationship. I think I finally am seeing the relationship clearly. That's different from making it a referendum." She pulled her hand back like it burned. "You're determined to punish me for one bad night. It was never just one night." The second time she tried softness, she went bigger. Dinner made, candles lit, my favorite music low in the background, the whole production. "You remember my birthday dinner next month? At my parents'?" "Yes." Elena asked if you were coming. I kept my face still. "Did she?" Mia watched me closely. "Why wouldn't she ask?" "No reason. She likes you, you know? She's your cousin. She's friendly with everyone." Mia's smile had an edge to it I hadn't seen before. Friendly isn't always all it is, though. I went to that dinner anyway, because avoiding it would have confirmed something I wasn't ready to confirm out loud. It was at Mia's parents' house. Family and a couple of close friends crowded around a table too small for the guest list. Mia performed the devoted girlfriend routine all night, laughing at things I hadn't said clever enough to earn a laugh, telling her mother how handy I was, like I was an appliance with decent manners. Her friend Priya sat across the table and watched the whole show with the expression of someone who'd seen this rerun before. Elena sat 2 seats down, careful not to look at me too often, which meant I noticed exactly how often she wasn't looking. Later, when she stepped out to take a call, I found an excuse to check the hallway. She was standing near the coat closet, phone back in her pocket, staring at nothing. "You okay?" I asked. "No." Then, quieter, "Every time I see you two together, I feel awful. And then you look at me and I feel worse, because I don't want you to stop." It was the first time either of us had said it plainly. "Elena, not here." Her voice dropped further. "I mean it, Jordan. Handle your life first. Then we talk. Not before. I know. I need you to actually know it, not just say it." The hallway door opened and Priya stepped through, pausing when she clocked the two of us standing closer than the moment called for. "Everything okay back here?" "Coat situation," I said. "Complicated closet." Priya didn't laugh. She glanced at Elena. "You good?" Elena nodded too fast. "Fine." Priya didn't believe her. I didn't either. Later that same night, back at the table, Mia's mother asked me how work was going, and Mia answered for me before I could open my mouth. "He's always busy. Weddings every weekend. I barely see him some months." She said it lightly, like a joke about my schedule, but there was an edge underneath it, aimed at nobody in the room except me. Her father laughed and said something about how a man who worked with his hands would always find steady money. And I nodded along because there was no version of that dinner table where the truth was going to land gently. Elena caught my eye across the room for half a second before looking back down at her plate, And I understood, the way you understand weather changing before it actually arrives, that neither of us was going to make it through many more nights like that one without something breaking. The night everything nearly tipped over happened 2 weeks later, at a park near Elena's building, because meeting indoors had started to feel like a decision neither of us was ready to make out loud. "This is a bad idea," she said, hands shoved in her jacket pockets. "You agreed to it fast for a bad idea. I'm working on my judgment." We walked the path in silence for a minute before she stopped and turned to face me. "I hate this. I hate that I look forward to your texts. I hate that I compare every guy I talk to against someone who's still technically taken. I'm not technically anything anymore. Not in the way that matters. Tell me to stop wanting this. I can't." She closed her eyes for a second. "I can tell you I need to be honest even when it's ugly. I can tell you I'm going to fix my life before I ask you for anything real. I can't tell you I don't want this." I stepped closer, close enough that the cold didn't matter anymore. "Then don't tell me that." Her eyes moved to my mouth and back up, and that single motion did more damage to my self-control than anything she could have said. I reached for her hand. She let me take it. Her fingers were freezing. "This is where decent people walk away," she whispered. "Then I'm about to be extremely decent, and I'm going to hate every second of it." I let go first. Her face did 3 things at once: hurt and relief and something like respect. "So that's it, then? For now?" That sounds like a rejection. It's the opposite of one. "I'm not going to make you a secret, Elena. And I'm not going to use you as my excuse to leave. I'm leaving because my relationship's already over. Not because there's someone better standing in front of me making the decision easy." She wiped under one eye, annoyed at herself for it. "You make it hard to stay mad at you. I could say something ridiculous to help. Please don't ruin the moment." "Handle your life, Jordan," she said, echoing herself from before, "and then we talk." "I will. Until then, don't text me." That one landed clean, but I understood it, and I didn't argue. The next night, I told Mia we needed to talk. She was at the kitchen table, phone face down beside her, which told me some part of her already knew. "I'm done," I said. No warm-up, no cushion. She stared at me. "Excuse me? I'm ending this." She laughed once, sharp. "After 2 years, you're just going to say that like you're canceling a subscription? We've been over longer than tonight." Her face went cold. "This is about Elena." I didn't answer fast enough. "Unbelievable," she said. "My own cousin. This is about us, Mia. Don't make it smaller than it is. I haven't crossed the line." "No." "But you wanted to." I held her stare. "Yes." The honesty hit harder than a denial would have. She grabbed her phone off the table like she needed something to hold. "You're disgusting. I'm late. I should have ended this before anyone else mattered to me. You walk out that door and everyone's going to know exactly what you did. My family, our friends, everyone. I'll make sure they hear that you chased my cousin while I was home trusting you. You weren't trusting me. You were ignoring me. There's a difference." She stepped closer, voice shaking with fury now instead of hurt. "You'll regret this. Maybe. But I won't regret being honest about it." I packed a bag that night. Work clothes, my laptop, the hard drives with client files, and I stayed with my business partner Marcus for the better part of 2 weeks while I found a small place with a garage I could convert into a real studio. Elena didn't answer my first message. I didn't blame her. Handle your life first meant exactly what it said, and I owed her the patience of actually doing that instead of just claiming I had. The real reckoning happened at Mia's birthday gathering, 3 weeks later, which I wasn't invited to and had no plans to attend. Elena went because she said hiding from her own family would only make Mia's version of events louder. She called me afterward from her car, voice tight with anger. "She told everyone you chased me around behind her back for months, that I ruined things between you two. I'm sorry. I should have expected that. There's more." Elena's voice cracked slightly. "Priya cornered me in the kitchen. Said she couldn't keep quiet anymore." "About what?" "The night of the storm." Mia wasn't just being lazy on the couch, Jordan. She was texting a guy from her office the entire time, Derek. Priya's known for weeks and didn't say anything because she thought it wasn't her business. Until tonight, when Mia stood in front of everyone calling me names for something I never did. I sat with that in silence for a second. The whole excuse, the whole narrative about being too tired, too stressed, too inconvenienced to help me. None of it had been about exhaustion. It had been about someone else entirely. And I'd spent weeks assuming the worst version of myself was the reason things had cracked. "Are you okay?" I asked. "No, but I will be." The story didn't collapse instantly, because real life rarely resolves that neatly. A few people stayed quiet, unwilling to pick a side that inconvenienced them. But the loudest voices, Mia's mother among them, got noticeably quieter once Derek's name was in the air. And Elena told me her aunt called 2 days later just to say, I should have asked before I believed her. Marcus read one of the awkward apology texts over my shoulder a few days later while eating cereal straight out of the mixing bowl, something a mutual friend had sent that said, heard there was more to the story than I realized. Hope you're doing okay. Wow, he said. Poetry. Be nice. I am being nice. That was generous of me. I didn't answer most of them. There wasn't much to say to people who'd needed a scandal to reconsider a version of events they could have questioned from the start. I gave Elena the space she'd asked for. Weeks of nothing but the occasional text about her day. Nothing pushed, nothing rushed. Then, on a Saturday afternoon, I drove to her building and sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes deciding whether I had any right to be there. I knocked anyway. She opened the door and looked at me for a long moment before saying anything. You shouldn't be here if there's still anything unfinished. There isn't. I moved out. I've got my own place. Mia knows it's over, and now everyone else does too, for reasons that had nothing to do with either of us. That doesn't erase what almost happened between us while you were still with her. No, it doesn't. And I'm not asking you to pretend it does. She crossed her arms, waiting. I'm not here because I'm lonely, I said. I'm here because the night my basement flooded, I saw the difference between someone who tolerates being needed and someone who actually shows up, and I haven't been able to unsee it since. You weren't my backup that night, Elena. You were the only real option. I think some part of me knew that before I was willing to say it. Her eyes filled, though her voice held steady. You rehearsed that. Twice. This was the version that embarrassed me the least. A small smile broke through despite herself, then faded into something more serious. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. I don't want to lose the rest of my family over this. I don't want that either. And I don't want to be the reason you did. You're not the reason. You're the reason I stopped pretending I didn't want more than what I had. She studied me a moment longer, then stepped back and opened the door wider. Come in. Nothing dramatic happened after that. No sweeping music. No instant fix. She made tea, because apparently that's simply what we did whenever things got complicated between us, and we sat on opposite ends of her couch like two people relearning how close was allowed to be. I need time, she said. You'll get it. I need honesty, even the uncomfortable kind. You'll get that too. And if Mia calls you, I don't want to be discussed like evidence in a case. You won't be. She nodded slowly, then moved a little closer. Not much, but enough that the space between us finally felt like a choice instead of a rule. I missed you, she said, and something about that plain sentence undid me more than any grand declaration could have. I missed you too. When she reached for my hand this time, her fingers weren't cold, and neither of us let go. 6 months later, I run my studio out of the garage of my own small place. No more basement floods, and business is better than it's ever been. Elena got promoted at the clinic, largely because her boss finally admitted the soft approach worked better than the loud one. We take weekend drives with nothing broken and nobody to rescue. Although I still keep a small toolkit in my trunk, because apparently I believe in preparation, even when nothing's on fire. Mia moved in with a friend after her circle got noticeably smaller. Derek didn't stick around once his name started, meaning something to other people. Reputation doesn't collapse all at once. It just slowly stops being believed. One evening, driving past my old street, Elena glanced over. That's the house? With the basement? That's the one. Worst night of your life? I thought about it. Not even close. No. It was the night the right person finally showed up. She was quiet for a second, then said, I almost didn't come. Mia told me it wasn't a big deal, that you were overreacting, I figured. I kept thinking, what if nobody actually goes? That was Elena. Not perfect, not fearless, but when it counted, she moved. I reached over and took her hand. For 2 years, I had mistaken tolerance for love. Had told myself that staying quiet was the same thing as being strong, even while it slowly taught someone they could give me less and less and still keep me. It took a flooded basement, a dead generator, and someone else's cousin doing the right thing to finally show me the difference. I didn't get a clean story out of it. Neither did she. We got consequences, awkward family dinners, a few people who still prefer the simpler version where I'm the villain. But we also got mornings without pretending. We got someone who shows up before being asked twice. We got a kind of care that never needed anyone else to be humiliated in order to feel real. And every time the forecast mentions ice now, Elena texts to ask if my basement's okay. I always tell her the same thing. Yeah, but bring the flashlight anyway. Would you have driven across town for someone else's emergency the way Elena did, even knowing it wasn't really your responsibility? And if the person who was supposed to show up for you never does, is it really betrayal to let someone else take their place?